Let me ask you something. When you think of Iran, what comes to mind? Be honest. Maybe you picture deserts, politics, or headlines filled with tension. But what if I told you there's another story? One buried beneath centuries of dust and overlooked by most history books. Before our world was measured by borders, before names like Iran or Israel meant what they mean today, there was just land. Sacred land. Land where kingdoms rose, fell, and sometimes fulfilled the will of heaven. This is the story of Persia. Today we call it Iran, but back then, it was a beating heart of empires, wisdom, and unexpected alliances. It's the land where prophets walked in exile, where foreign kings became unlikely heroes, and where God's hand worked silently behind palace walls. In this story, we'll uncover more than history. We'll rediscover people. People like Cyrus, Esther, and Nehemiah. Flawed, courageous, chosen. We'll step inside ancient courts and dusty scrolls. And we'll see that faith, freedom, and destiny don't always come from expected places. So let's begin, because once you see Persia through the eyes of Scripture, you'll never look at Iran the same way again. Let me take you back to the birth of one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. Picture it, dusty plains, armies gathering, banners flying under the blazing sun. At the center of it all, Cyrus the Great. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a visionary. Unlike so many before him, Cyrus didn't crush cultures. He uplifted them. He allowed people to worship freely, to rebuild what had been destroyed. Sound familiar? Yes, Cyrus, a Persian king, is the very one who gave the exiled Jews permission to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. That's not legend, it's scripture. In fact, the Bible calls him God's anointed. Now pause and ask yourself, why would God anoint a foreign king? What does that say about who he chooses? And why? And Cyrus wasn't the only one. Enter Darius the Great, another Persian king who played a key role in Israel's restoration. Under his reign, temples rose from rubble, roads were carved across empires, and royal decrees echoed divine promises. But what made Persia truly stand out wasn't just its rulers. It was its heart. The Achaemenid Empire was a place where diversity wasn't feared, it was celebrated. Imagine walking down the streets of Persepolis. You'd hear dozens of languages, see garments from distant lands, smell spices from across the world. Jews, Zoroastrians, Greeks, Egyptians, they all lived, traded, and worshipped under the same sky. Can you picture that kind of harmony? A place where scrolls could be written in peace, where prophets could reflect and dream, where ideas traveled faster than armies. It's no wonder that during this time, much of the Hebrew Bible was compiled, edited, and preserved. Persia gave the Jewish people something they hadn't had in generations: safety. Let's talk about legacy. What did Persia leave behind? You've probably heard of Persepolis, the jewel of the empire. Towering columns, walls etched with stories of every nation under Persian rule, architecture that seemed to touch the heavens. But the real legacy? It's not just stone. It's the way Persia shaped the world that followed. Their postal system inspired Rome. Their administrative systems influenced future empires. And their willingness to embrace religious freedom? That left a spiritual mark that we still feel today. And spiritually, let's not forget, without Persia, there is no Esther, no Nehemiah, no return from exile, no second temple. Persia was not a footnote in the biblical story. It was a chapter, one filled with tension, beauty, and divine orchestration. So the next time someone mentions Iran, don't just think of what it is. Think of what it was. Think of scrolls hidden in royal courts, of a young Jewish queen who risked everything, of a cupbearer who rebuilt a city wall. Think of Persia as it truly was, a land chosen not by men, but used by God. Let's explore the daily life and religious cohabitation in ancient Persia. What was it like to live there? Could your neighbor be a Jew, a Babylonian, or a Zoroastrian priest? Yes, absolutely. Religious tolerance wasn't just practiced, it was policy. Each group maintained its customs. In many cities, Jewish synagogues stood within walking distance of fire temples. The Persian kings allowed religious leaders to lead their communities without persecution. This unique cohabitation helped preserve sacred texts and oral traditions. Jewish scribes worked without fear. Debates about the Torah and its meaning continued in exile. All of this set the stage for the development of rich theological insights that would influence generations to come. Now let's look at Ezra, priest, scribe, and reformer. The book of Ezra shows us a spiritual and physical return. Under Persian support, Ezra brought with him not only scrolls, but reform. He emphasized holiness, separation from idolatry, and a return to the law. And who enabled his mission? Persian kings. It's a powerful reminder that God can use secular rulers for sacred purposes. Have you ever experienced help from unexpected people in your life? Maybe a boss, a teacher, even someone who doesn't share your beliefs, yet played a key role in your journey? That's the story of Ezra. And it's the story of a nation that offered sanctuary to those God had not forgotten. Let's dive deeper into the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among those fragile ancient parchments discovered near Qumran, scholars found mentions of Persian kings. Think about that. A Jewish sect, living in isolation in the Judean wilderness, still remembered the reigns of Darius and Cyrus with reverence. Why? Because those kings were part of a divine rescue plan. The scrolls echo the hope that what happened once, restoration from exile, might happen again. That goes like Isaiah had already spoken this. I summon you by name, God said of Cyrus, though you do not acknowledge me. The Dead Sea Scrolls reflect that faith, that God can use those one to establish his own. And here's a question for you. If God moved through ancient kings then, who might he be working through now? Let's shift now to something often overlooked: Persia's role in the development of Jewish prophecy and apocalyptic vision. While in exile, Jewish thinkers encountered Zoroastrianism. This ancient Persian faith believed in a cosmic battle between good and evil, angels as heavenly agents, and a final judgment where light would overcome darkness. Sound familiar? These ideas deeply influenced apocalyptic books like Daniel, 1 Enoch, and eventually Revelation. The very language of angelic warfare, beasts rising from the sea, and celestial battles draws from imagery shaped during the Persian period. We're not saying Judaism was compromised. Quite the opposite. It expanded. It found new ways to express eternal truths, helped along by the world around it. Now, the Magi. Yes, the wise men from the East who visited Jesus at his birth. Ever wonder who they were? They weren't just astrologers. They were likely members of the priestly caste of Persia. The same lineage of men who studied stars, read sacred texts, and believed that divine events were written in the heavens. Imagine this: the descendants of Zoroastrian priests, watching the sky, seeing something new. A star, a sign, and they knew. They packed treasures, crossed deserts, and bowed before a Jewish child in Bethlehem. Persia, once again, kneeling at the edge of God's unfolding plan. And here's a deeper reflection. Isn't it incredible that a land once called enemy became home to protectors of prophecy? That kings once feared for their power eventually made decrees in favor of Jerusalem? God's plans don't follow national borders. They follow obedience, humility, and timing. Let's talk modern Iran, because the land is ancient, but its spiritual echoes haven't faded. Many don't realize it, but Iran still holds ruins of the very palaces where God's will was spoken by kings. The soil beneath Tehran and Shiraz holds layers of sacred history. And today, within its borders, quiet revivals are happening. Underground churches. People dreaming of the Messiah. A hunger for truth that politics can't silence. Could it be that Iran's story isn't over? Could it be that the same land where Cyrus once reigned is still part of the divine narrative? Think about this. In the Bible, Persia was an empire of reversal. Jews went from captives to builders. Esther went from orphan to queen. Nehemiah went from servant to governor. Maybe the reversal isn't finished. Maybe God is still writing. And perhaps He's waiting for us to open the next chapter. Closing reflection. So now I ask you, what do you see when you look at Iran? A political enemy? A foreign land? Or do you see prophecy? Restoration? The fingerprints of God on every stone, scroll, and star? History remembers empires, but God remembers hearts. And Persia, modern Iran, may still have a purpose in this unfolding story. Because in the end, no empire is too distant, and no people too far, for God to use again. Maybe, just maybe, the next great chapter is still to come.